to the Life Burst podcast. We're going over the new centers that you can play in the crossover set. This time we're going to be talking about Toko here. So, what makes Toko different than the rest of the virtual centers that you can run? Well, that's a good question. Basically, it states that when you enter, you can invite two collab livers. Reminder, the GP, Tiffany, and I will be giving out collab liver tokens, and you could be playing with us if you want. And the thing that you can do with those is basically twice, right? Once per collab liver. You can give negative 8,000 to a Signi. You can do as many times as you want, so you could do negative, whatever, 16k if you want as well on a Signi, which is pretty crazy. And then once per game action for, again, 0 enter, you can give target Signi 5,000, negative 5,000. Then you target a Signi with level 1. And you vanish it, and then something with 8,000 power, and you vanish it. So it's tough to hit all of those requirements, but if you do all of those things correctly, then you can do negative 8,000, negative 8,000, negative 5,000, vanish, kill 8,000. Which means, generally speaking, you can get up anywhere from 3 to 5 Signis dead with this effect. I think the best way to maximize Toko is to make sure that you are doing this over a little bit longer of a term, even though she seems to read very aggressive because she has explosive for no enter damage output. But I actually think it might be better to slow her down just a little bit, just so that way you can get a little bit more damage, play more of a mid-range deck. And this is sort of what I've come up to work with that. Now, I've played virtuals kind of extensively at this point, or at least tested against them kind of extensively, and I found some information with them, which is that generally speaking, the white virtuals are better than the black virtuals, but we're going to try to make a kind of a balance work here. You don't have to play Toko in a virtual deck specifically. I decided to do so for a couple reasons, mostly because of Last Light Flash. Getting the extra 2 collab livers feels kind of important. It also lets you bounce Signi on the opponent's hand back to their hand. The reason why I like that one is because bouncing feels very much like, okay, now I can deal with all of these small threats, 8,000 or less, very easily with Toko, but it's going to be tough for me to deal with the big threats, and this is one of those ways to do it. Also gives you a way to do things pre-attack phase, which might matter in some scenarios. But the big thing is it gets you those 2 collab livers, right? Yes, you can go ahead and get yourself enter charge, you can get yourself non-enter charge, you can get yourself cards in hand. All these things are valid as well. But the extra 2 collab livers is theoretically another negative 8, negative 8, right? And that over time being with this piece and your center, you are looking at bouncing 8, or at least getting rid of 8 Signis over the course of some amount of turns, which is insane. Insane to do that for 0 enter. And that's sort of what we're building around with this. So the rest of this deck is sort of with that in mind. I chose Salvage because it mills yourself, and there's a lot of black Signi that like to have some stuff in the trash to deal with in this deck, especially in the Virtuals deck. It lets you refill your hand too. You're milling yourself a little bit as well. Outside of that, we aren't going with the Sandbaka core that I did with Anj. We're actually going to go with MC Line Dig, MC Line Disrespect. This is my go-to. I'm adding white into a deck, but I also kind of need mid-range options. And then Machina, right? Machina is just a solid way to get some enter back. You could go with the Anj. You could make an argument for the Anj, but the Anj is more expensive to get cards back from, and I don't like it. I like the utility a little bit better, because this is more evenly split too, in terms of how much white we've got, right? Like, we've got 15 white going on, and that's not including the multicolors. I believe that's 15 plus 2, so it's actually 17 white. And we have a reason for running white in the deck too. Namely, we are running some Chickasaw. I probably want to find a way to fit a 3rd Chickasaw in here, but it's really white intensive. To do its enter effect, it costs white, and then to do its ability, it costs white. The upside is you can kind of hold on that ability in case something were to happen. So it's like it's a delayed payment, which is nice. The rest of the white that you're gonna be running is probably Kahoku, which allows you to bounce something to the opponent's hand. It's just slightly better than its black alternative here, Ni Punto, and that's just because this negative 3,000, negative 5,000 still is not quite as good as just straight up bounce an entire level, the most popular level of Signi. We're also running some other good white stuff here. Chima actually pairs really nicely with this card, which you target a virtual in your trash and you put it in the bottom of your deck. It gets plus 4,000 until end of turn. It has a really good life burst of negative 8,000 as well. But it pairs nicely with this. It makes this actually usable. It has sort of the same effect. It goes up to 7,000 for power. But then it also has a really, really great life burst. And then we're also running at our low levels Pandora. I think Pandora is really, really solid, especially in this deck. Being able to kind of filter through the trash that you're not your trash, but through the cards that are not going to be super great for you is going to be pretty big game. And then vanilling something is also really big game. It's like a world where I'm like, ugh, I wish I could even fit in like 2 more Yukis in here or something. But it's not virtual theme. I do have one card that's not a virtual, so just omitting here, which is this Brutus. But I wanted a little bit more mill. And it was a level 2 that milled. So I took it. It's not necessary in the build at all, but I wanted a little bit more mill, especially because we've replaced out the piece that auto mills, which I genuinely think is a really, really good piece, and we have to justify not running that. And the justification is we do have a slight mill package here with Lane. Lane also can mill your opponent around 7, which is good enough, right? Like, it's good enough that if you get this trigger once or twice, the opponent probably isn't going to run out of cards. Against the decks that you're trying to mill out anyways, you've got that, and I believe I stuffed like 2 in here that are, mill the opponent 2, and that tangential mill altogether should be enough to put your opponent into refresh range at some point. You see it's very light though, so you are going to need to figure out a way to make it happen. The other reason why this card's actually really good in here is you can select one of your virtuals, specifically a Celine Girls Academy, and then you can basically enter stash it, right? It's like enter exchange. So what this basically says is it lets you get access to white that you're cheating on. So for both those abilities, I like it. I actually genuinely like it. The rest of the deck has 1 core in it, which is the Rena core. Rena is a card that I've actually always been impressed with. Being able to negative 4,000 something and then follow it up with a negative 3,000 to each Signi on the opponent's field has always felt particularly powerful. It's more powerful in this deck when you think you also give negative 8,000 to things. So negative 8,000 plus the negative 3,000 is enough to kill most things. The negative 4,000 plus the negative 8,000 probably will kill anything. I just like it in combo with all of these things to make it kind of like work out in your favor. This is the virtual deck that I think Toko plays out pretty well. It is not a carbon copy of mono white aggro, which is also kind of one of the reasons I like it. And I do think the virtuals do just enough to push it over. Again, I'm already in the direction of virtuals because I want to use this Lazulite flash to get more collab livers, so it kind of pins me into virtuals. But if you wanted to get rid of the Lazulite flash and you were okay with just doing a little bit of burst damage here, I actually genuinely think you could cut the you could probably cut out the virtuals package completely. You still end up running white for probably Exia and Remember and those types of effects, but it will probably function pretty well. I just think this is a lot of really efficient removal at the front end, and I think that's actually pretty good for Toko to make it a little bit more of an aggressively leaned mid-range deck. Let me know what your thoughts are, though.